Welcome to My Ramblings. This episode, the most important lesson of my career. I think this was during my first rotation in the PDC internship with the Department of the Navy. Again, I was in the Utilities Engineering Department, and one of the guys that had graduated a couple of years before me, he was telling me that the shops were working on this um, problem with they had with some pilot wire relay systems, and that's kind of where you have a feeder that feeds a circuit breaker, but you have these relays that are set up so that this relay at this breaker, almost like I'm looking in a mirror, sends a signal to this breaker down here to tell it to trip in the event of a fault in the line. Or vice versa. I don't remember. I should remember, but he was going over a theoretical, he had some knowledge of it, I guess, and he was drawing a thing where he's got two lines and he's showing two lines with current, and that's sort of a model of how a pilot wire works, and basically it has current circulating and it does something, and you can also use control functions also to tell a breaker to open or close, and so I kind of was interested. We went out, and this was actually being run as a training exercise. They didn't want, they wanted people to be familiar with the pilot wire relay systems, before there was an issue with them. But so instead of just having one or two guys, solving one problem, they had a lot of the crew out there, to learn and stuff. And they had done a lot of things. They had brought in a contractor to test the communication and control cables that ran between. Usually, it would be like, I don't know, 25, 50, 100 wires because they were more susceptible to breakdown. And you always wanted to be able to use an alternate pair. I don't remember exactly how many pairs. So I kind of got interested. I think they solved one. Um, and so I went to my textbook on protective relaying systems, or I went somewhere else. No, I think it was the protective relay system book, my textbook. Learned a little bit about pilot wire relay systems, and I was talking about it to one of the electricians, and he was saying this, that. So we went out and we got information on the relays that were being used, and I got a hold of the manuals. I was reading up on them, and what we found out is that this thing operated under a transfer trip. In other words, it had polarity to the connection. Um, so maybe the transfer trip and the polarity don't quite. What I ended up doing after this was all done, I wrote a report on it and stuff, and went over a lot of the theory and then the practical stuff. And I haven't reviewed it, but I have it sitting there waiting for when I write the chapter in my book. But what ended up happening is, so we went out and we checked, and we noticed that, well, somebody had reversed the polarity. And we're thinking, should we hear that? I mean, we looked, you know, and I'm pretty sure we didn't open the cabinet. The guy, was saying, well, if that noise is happening, we don't want to open the panel. Um, but what it is, it sounds like tracking, and I guess from some other sources, found out there's like a porcelain barrier, not a porcelain, I forget, phenolic or something, that's in there that acts as an insulator. Well, sometimes over time, these things will absorb moisture, and then you get tracking and stuff through there, and which means that if you close the breaker or do anything, you run the risk of massive failure. And yeah, I'm not real sure about all the details on this. It was kind of a complex situation, but the lesson I learned is that somebody didn't accidentally reverse the connections on that. They reversed them, number one, to keep the conductors energized so that the insulation wouldn't degrade, but to intentionally disable um, the ability for the upstream breaker, the upstream relay, to cause a trip or a close on the breaker that we were at. And so why was that an important lesson? Because if we had taken the connections and if we had put them back the way they were, we could have had a catastrophe on our hands with all the short circuit current that would flow through there. Um, you know, I really need to review that because it doesn't sound quite right. Well, why didn't it just blow up if it was tracking? Obviously, there wasn't enough tracking to cause a complete short circuit, but really the breaker wasn't suitable for use, and we didn't open it up, so it could have been other things as well. But so I consider it to be one of the most important lessons in my career because if we hadn't heard that sort of hissing sound, and we might have not realized why that was swapped. And so the reason it's the most important lesson is just because you find something wrong, uh, there's a hell of a lot more investigation you got to do um, before you just go fixing an error. And really, it also calls out the need for chain of command. The idea is you find it, you report it to your supervisor, he reports it to his foreman, and then it's looked into and discussed. Okay, equipment gets checked out before you put it in operations. Equipment that's left unenergized can't absorb moisture, what have you, and then you have all kinds of problems. Um, all kinds of checks that you have to go through before you start the equipment back up. And so, because it sort of became, oh, just exactly what I already said. I consider that to be the most important lesson in my career. Okay. Thank you for tuning in. See you next episode.